What is going on, everybody? Welcome to my channel, and today I have a request from Michael B. Jordan, who wants me to do a mermaid. Now, this is a little out of my comfort zone, but I've done mermen before. I've done Ariel before, but never a mermaid. So here we go. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen the new live-action Little Mermaid, but I did, and it was actually really good. I think it was one of the better live-action Disney remakes. So, we're going to go off of that for our mermaid today. I love Halle Bailey's version of Ariel, so I wanted to pay homage to that in this drawing. And I guess now would be a good time to mention that I'm not doing any drawings today. We're only painting. There's a reason for that. I'll explain later. So let's get right into the first step. If you've watched any of my videos before, you know that I always start with the eyes. It's just kind of like my thing. But because this is a portrait, it makes sense that we'd want to start with the eyes. The eyes are the windows to the soul, right? What's going on in there is going to tell us how she feels. Now, I already mentioned that I'm going to be taking inspiration from the new live-action Little Mermaid, but obviously the lighting in that movie isn't always the greatest. So I'm going to be adding a little bit of my own, flavor, I guess you could say. I'm going to make her hair more of an auburn color. Maybe that's just me wanting to draw Ariel from The Little Mermaid, the original animated version. But either way, the colors I'm going to be using are going to be a lot more vibrant than the ones used in the movie. And speaking of the movie, can we appreciate how beautiful the cinematography was during the underwater scenes? Like, I'm not a fan of CGI in general, but that stuff was gorgeous. Another thing I love about this movie is they made her tail look very realistic, which is a smart choice, because when we're watching on screen, it's easier for us to believe that the tail is real if it looks real. Even though it's CGI, it looks so lifelike. So I've got the basic shape of her eye down. She's looking up towards the surface of the water. You can see the light glistening in her eyes. You can see the redness of her iris, which is really important to show because it brings life to the character. And then, you can also see how the light is affecting the skin around her eyes. We've got some nice highlights there. And you can see the shape of her eyebrow as well. That's important to keep in mind when you're drawing the eye. Don't forget the eyebrow. A lot of times people will forget that, and the face just won't look right. The next step is to add some color. Now, I'm using a limited palette of colors for this piece. I'm trying to make it so the colors all work together. For the background, I'm using a deep blue because we're underwater, obviously. I'm also using turquoise, teal, violet, magenta, white, black, red, and yellow. I'm trying to stick to those colors and make everything work. I've added some teal to the bottom half of her eye. You can see I'm also starting to add some darker colors to the bottom of the painting. This is going to bring more attention to the eyes, which is where we want most of the attention to be. We want the eyes to pop. When we look at this painting, I want our eyes to be drawn to the eyes. Weird. Okay, now I'm going to start blocking out the shapes of the face. I'm using a smaller paintbrush, but you can still see the basic shapes forming here. Once I've got the basic shapes of the face, I'm going to start filling them in. Now you can see I'm using brighter colors. That's because the top half of the painting is going to be the sky. And as you know, the sky is usually brighter than the bottom half, which is the water. You can see I've added some violet to the top of the painting. I'm also using yellow for the light, reflecting off of the water. The cool colors in the bottom half of the painting are going to contrast nicely with the warmer colors of the sky. I'm also starting to build up the colors on Ariel's face. As I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to limit the amount of colors I'm using. It's challenging, but it's fun too. You can see here that I've started to add some red to the tips of her hair. This is going to make the tips of her hair pop, and bring more attention to them. The more saturated colors are going to help bring life to this painting. And I'm really enjoying the process. Now I'm starting to add more detail to the eyes. I'm using a smaller paintbrush and just taking my time with it. This is probably the hardest part of the painting, just getting the eyes to look right. It's so important to get the eyes to look good because they're the focal point of the painting. They're the most important part. Now you can see I'm using white and black to add some highlights to the eyes. White and black are two colors that I feel everyone should use more often. They're super versatile and can be used to add some much-needed pops of color to your paintings. Now I've got the eyes done. I think they came out pretty good. I think they look nice and bright. Now I'm going to move on to the rest of the face. This is going to be pretty easy compared to the eyes. I'm going to add some shadows to her cheeks and forehead. You can see I'm using cool colors because remember, this is the top half of the painting, and the top half is supposed to be the sky. So even though it's on her face, it's still affected by the color of the sky. This is where I start to lose track of time. I just get into the zone and start painting away. I'm adding more color to the background here, building up the highlights on the water. Remember, these are supposed to be the highlights, the places where the light is hitting the water, so make sure you don't over-darken those spots. Now I'm starting to add some detail to Ariel's lips. You can see I'm using a smaller paintbrush and taking my time with it. The details in the lips are important, but they're not as important as the eyes. So once I've got what I need, I'm going to move on to the rest of the painting. I'm adding some highlights to her skin. Skin tones are important. Remember, this is a portrait, so we want to capture the likeness of Ariel as best we can. I'm using a combination of warm and cool colors to give her skin some depth. And finally, I'm adding some detail to her hair. Her hair is important. It's one of the most iconic parts of her character. Make sure you take your time with it and get it to look as nice as you can. Well, I guess that's the painting finished. I actually had a lot of fun making this one. I'm glad I decided to push myself and try something new. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it too. If you did, make sure to hit that like button. Consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.